Hello, everybody, and welcome to our From the Field Farm Chat with Idaho Wheat today. My name is Ryan Mortensen. I am the Communications and Programs Manager for the Idaho Wheat Commission. Today, we are privileged to have joining with us today Jay O'Neill. Jay is a proprietor of Commodity Consulting and comes with us all knowing about current issues and situations happening regarding uh, exports, China shipbuilding. And Jay, if you kind of will give us a brief introduction of yourself, who you are and what you do for our listeners today.
Well, hello, hello, Idaho Wheat. Pleasure to be here with you today. I am Jay O'Neill from H.J. O'Neill Commodity Consulting. In essence, I'm an old grain trader. I've spent 32 years trading grain for various companies, going all the way back to Continental Grain and Pillsbury and a number of others. I've managed export facilities in the U.S. Gulf and done vessel chartering and a variety of things. And for the last 12 or 15 years, I've been engaged in commodity consulting and some legal work through North American Export Grain Association as a grain arbitrator for disputes. So that's the Cliff Notes version of who I am. I've now got about 50 years, sadly, I guess, under my belt in this business. And most recently, a lot of my work has evolved around what's going on in global ocean freight markets.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. For our listeners, before we get started here on our discussion, please feel free to ask a question. You can put that question in the chat or raise your hand. Or unmute your microphone and I'll be sure to get that question to Jay and see if we can get an answer to that. So Jay, let's go ahead and get started. If you wouldn't mind, for some of our listeners who haven't been following along what's been going on regarding ocean freight, can you kind of start at the beginning and kind of give us a rundown of what has happened and currently where we are sitting now with regard to ocean freight?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll talk a little quick. I hope that's okay for everybody because it is kind of a complicated and long story. And we'll try to shorten it as much as possible. But in very simplistic terms, when we talk about global ocean freight, and particularly on both the military and the commercial side, the United States used to be at one time, if you go back to World War II, and I hate to go back that far, but that's where this story takes us. If you go back to World War II, we were, producing a Liberty ship every week. So we were the world's largest shipbuilding. You come out of World War II, and the United States finds itself awash in ships. I mean, we had a huge surplus of ships that we didn't need anymore. And of course, we were giving many of them away or taking them to the scrapyard. And a lot of them went to Europe and other countries. And the United States after World War II figured, well, I don't need that many ships again. We don't have such a conflict going on. And as time progressed through the 1950s and the 1960s, the U.S., quite frankly, we got comfortable. We got a little complacent. We said to ourselves, there's no other emergencies. We don't need to have a big shipbuilding capacity. And things shrunk. Shipyards and ship labor shrunk to gradually, as we even went up into the 2000s, we didn't see any emergency or need to do much in regards to shipbuilding. Shipbuilding went to the UK for a while, then it went up to Norway as far as significant shipbuilding capacity. Then it went over to Asia, to Japan, and then Korea, and eventually over to China. So as you get into the 2000s here, in particularly the last 15 years, I guess most significantly, we find ourselves that the U.S., by and large, doesn't really build much in the way of ships anymore. We're lucky to get one ship out a year or every 2 years. So the U.S. has woken up, and I think what woke us up a bit was the tensions, if you want to call it that, between the U.S. and China, and particularly over there in Asia with the shipping lanes, as well as other things going on in the Middle East. And what you have to wake up to or realize is two things. One, in what took us to where we are today, is U.S. Navy has destroyers and aircraft carriers and all kinds of military ships but the U.S. Navy doesn't supply itself internally. The U.S. Navy depends on the merchant marine and what we call replenishment vessels. So those tankers and those cargo ships that take food and fuel and other supplies out to the task force once they're deployed, that's the merchant marine. And so we don't have very many merchant marine ships. And even today, we find the U.S. Navy says we're very challenged in trying to put a new task force out somewhere across the oceans because we don't have enough replenishment vessels to keep them supplied during their deployment. So we have a military aspect that we need to help, that we need to beef up relative to the merchant marine. We also have a Navy program that we need to beef up. We have about a 600 fleet ship, 600 ship fleet right now. The Navy would like to have 650 or at least 625 naval vessels, but we can't build them fast enough. If you look what's happening, and then you take the commercial side and you say, well, if we get in a dispute with somebody like China, and China is the major shipbuilding entity in the world today, that puts us in a difficult situation. We do have something called the Jones Act, but the Jones Act has been largely ineffective. I'll just leave it at that because we could have a whole day's argument on that. So fast forward, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in the United States with about 5 commercial shipyards, maybe, depending on how you stretch it, 3 military naval shipyards. And you look at places like China, China has 190 active shipyards. So China is producing the large majority of today's ships, and it doesn't matter who you are, the United States, Europe, or somebody else. The world is depending on China to build ships because it's cheap. They build the cheapest ships and the fastest ships. Yeah, here in the United States, as you probably can well imagine or know, you put in a ship order and it takes you over 4 years to build a commercial ship. It takes you over 4 or 5 years to build a military destroyer or a major military vessel because of all the paperwork and everything else. And then even at that, they're usually behind schedule. China will spit a vessel out numerous vessels out every year. So that's where it takes us. We woke up to the fact that, hey, we've been asleep for too many years and we need to beef up our shipbuilding. And that quickly leads you to a choice or a decision, I guess I should say. The decision is once we, the United States, have concluded we need to beef up our naval and our commercial and our merchant marine fleets. The next question is, okay, how are we going to do it? And the next question is, who's going to pay for it? And under this USTR 301, U.S. Trade Representative 301, the theme of it, I guess, the underlying theme of it is support U.S. shipbuilding, and 2, make somebody else pay for it. Because you either have U.S. taxpayers pay for it or you have somebody else pay for it. And this objective is let's see if we can get China or somebody else to pay for it. So that's a real quick down and dirty overview of where we are today and what we're trying to accomplish. And then I'll just very quickly say, from my point of view, my analysis is the USTR 301 proposal is terribly flawed, terribly inefficient, and not going to accomplish the objective either in helping us build more ships or giving us more revenue to build more ships, nor at the same time, it's probably going to do a heck of a lot of damage, particularly to the U.S. ag sector. So I'll stop there for a moment and see what else you want to chat about.
I'm wondering, Jay, was there some kind of tipping point that led to this investigation?
Well, the USTR 301 actually has been a document on the table for a couple of years. It goes back to the Biden administration, to where the U.S. woke up to the fact that we're not building many ships, and we are at tensions, particularly with China, particularly over in the South China Sea, are escalating a bit. And I think some people woke up to the fact of the what if proposition. What if China were to take some actions militarily, be it on Taiwan or be it some kind of blockage and restriction to commercial commerce through the South China Sea, which is a major shipping lane for everybody. The question is, well, how would we react and how could we react? And I think waking up to the fact that we'd have a darn difficult time reacting to something like that, given our shipbuilding and our shipbuilding needs that we have present today. But that sat on the table until just recently, a couple months ago, when that document was picked up by the new administration, examined, and said, "Oh, we got to do something."
Back to your statement about the Section 301 being flawed and the impact it will have on the ag industry. So about 90% of wheat grown in the Pacific Northwest is exported. We rely heavily on ocean-going vessels. We have about 80% of global goods that are also exported using ocean-going vessels. Can you tell us what potential ripple effects on global trade this type of change could have?
Well, again, the objective is just to get somebody else to pay for it. I understand that. I don't want to be taxed any more than anybody else. Um, but the USTR, they obviously U.S. Trade Representative does not have much knowledge and expertise on the subject of global shipping and the effect it has on our economy. And I think they're learning as they go, but they've got a bit of the learning curve yet to complete. So the current proposal, and originally, I say originally a month ago, just prior to April, it was let's put a tax, they call it a service fee, on every Chinese ship, every Chinese built ship that visits a US port. That was the original proposal. And then they realized that, well, that isn't going to work too much for various reasons. And they had that listening session in April, and they decided, and they did listen to a lot of the trade input from various organizations, and they made adjustments. And the new adjustment is we're not going to tax every Chinese built ship. We're only going to, because China right now has built about 57% of the global fleet, and we're talking commercial fleet, both container ships and dry bulk ships, have been built in China. And if you look at the order book for 2025, 2026, going out to 2027, the new order book for additional vessels is close to 75% Chinese built. They've actually been taking business away from Japan and Korea because they build cheaper ships than Japan and Korea, who in turn build considerably cheaper ships than we do here in the States. So the new adjustment is let's put this service fee on Chinese-owned ships. So if you're a Chinese operator, you own a ship and you're headquartered in China, you own an operator or operate a ship, we're going to put a service fee on you when you visit the United States, any port in the United States. And they're only thinking short-sightedly on imports. So the container industry says, well, we bring in a lot of consumer goods, so we're concerned about that service fee because it does come in on a lot of Chinese-owned ships as well as non-Chinese owned ships. And they haven't considered much at all U.S. exports, corn, wheat, soybean meal, DDGs, or meat, pork, beef, chicken exports, cotton exports, and I could go on, crude oil exports. They haven't considered the export side because they're only importing, or they're only taxing, if you will, the ships when they first come in for a visit. And I think they need to open their eyes and look at that. So right now, the current program, and I'm writing up a response to give to a couple of organizations for the next listening session that's going to take place in May. And I hope they will listen a little further. I hope they'll make some adjustments. But the net of it is, look, guys, shipping lines, if you're talking about commercial container ships coming in with all the Nike shoes and T-shirts, shirts, clothing, goods, and tech items, your Apple iPads and everything. All those ships coming in are engaged in alliances between different shipping lines, and they can very easily they can adjust their shipping routes. They can say, let's take the Chinese-owned ships and put them on the European route. let's take the non-Chinese owned ships. They may be Chinese built, but they're now owned by another shipping line that's not Chinese headquartered. And we'll put that into greater service into the US routes. And by doing that, the shipping lines say, we can avoid these fees. It'll take some work, it will take some inconvenience, but we can do it rather than suffer the service fees that the USTR wants to place. On the export side, dry bulk, you look and you say, well, the Chinese owned ships in the dry bulk fleet are somewhere between 25 and 30% Chinese owned that are sailing the ocean. And if you put the tax on those ships, it's going to substantially increase the cost of a wheat farmer, a wheat exporter to ship wheat or corn or soybeans or other agricultural products outbound. And so what we're going to do, and we're already seeing shipping lines, dry bulk shipping lines talk about, well, we're going to develop a two-tier system. If you pick up the phone and call on a ship and you're in Brazil and you say, give me a ship to load something out of Brazil or Argentina or the Black Sea, and you don't care who the owner of the ship is, there'll be one rate. But if you want a non-Chinese owner, it will be a higher rate. And that rate will fluctuate with supply and demand and market conditions. So when we pick up the phone in the United States and say, I need a dry bulk ship to ship out grain outbound, you're going to find you have to pay a higher value than any of your competitors. And that's very unfortunate because it's going to put U.S. grain, wheat, and other commodities at a disadvantage to our competitors. And we already have a big enough time struggling with the competition out there. We don't need to have ocean freight rates jump up on us and be more expensive than it is from any other origin in the world. So I think they're misguided. And again, when we go to that two-tier system, the U.S. farmer is going to end up paying part of that cost, that trickle down economics of having to pay higher freight and still maintain a competitiveness is going to mean we got to pay less for the wheat. We got to pay less for the corn and the soybeans in order to help compensate. That's going to hurt the U.S. farmer. It's going to hurt our volume of U.S. exports. And because now you are having to pay that premium, and the market has gone into that adjustment, you're not going to collect any fees for Chinese-owned ships, the U.S. government. So the whole thing is a failure as far as collecting fees to help fund a shipbuilding effort in the United States. And in the process, it's damaging our exports and hurting our farmers. So that's my assessment of it.
So even after all these efforts, it sounds like the incentive to increase shipbuilding in the United States is still not there.
No, we still, again, the incentives we have in place today are under the Jones Act, and that has been so ineffective, it's laughable. But the Jones Act has huge political support through labor unions and so forth, even though it's pretty darn ineffective. So no, we don't produce, we have produced, you take a look at replenishment ships right now, or what we call Jones Act ships, which are ships that are built in the United States, have U.S. captains and crews, and come under full U.S. Coast Guard requirements. And you look and say, how many of those vessels, particularly dry bulk, for taking wheat, as you probably know, and your listeners probably know, what we call PL 480, food for peace, food donations that we give overseas. There is a requirement that those shipments go out on Jones Act U.S. flagged vessels if they're available. We have 3.5 of those vessels in the Jones Act fleet dry bulk. I say 3.5 because one of them is just so small, it's a 6,000 tonner. It can only be used to the Caribbean. And when you pick up the phone and hire one of those vessels for a food aid shipment, you quickly find that the freight rate, because it's U.S. built, U.S. crewed, U.S. registered, is very close to 4 times world freight value. So if I can charter a ship out of the West Coast to go over to Asia for, I'm just going to use a round number. If I can do that for $25 a ton, and I say, no, I need a Jones Act, I need a U.S. built, U.S. flagged ship, I'm going to get an answer of A, it's not available, or B, it's 4 times that cost. It's not $25 a ton now, it's over $100 a ton. Try to be competitive in the regular commercial market with that kind of freight cost. It's going to be pretty darn difficult. So we have challenges that we need to overcome.
Question from the chat, Jay. How large are these service fees and what impact could these have on goods and commodities? And then also the same question regarding exports. How big of an increase in wheat price on delivery?
It's going to be, it's varied. It goes on how many times the vessel comes to the United States. It depends on how many. Right now, there is an exemption under what we call Annex 1 of the trade agreement says you can't use a Chinese-owned ship unless you pay the service fee. Annex 2 says you can use a Chinese-built ship as long as it's not owned by a Chinese entity, and as long as it's under 80,000 deadweight tons in size. So if you take that 80,000 deadweight ton, you're going to encompass probably rough guesstimate 95% of the dry bulk ships that we would utilize for carrying grain. If you increase that 800,000 deadweight ton maximum size limit to 85,000, you encompass pretty much everything needed. So under Annex 2, you at least could get non-Chinese owned ships and find enough that would fit the exemptions of Annex 2. And you, the United States, the US shipper, would probably lose access to about 25% of the global fleet. Now, so when you say what's the tax and what's the cost implication, the tax is going to range according to the size and the deadweight, the cargo carrying capacity of the ship. It can be 50 or built ships that go eventually, because it's a graduating scale that moves up with time, goes all the way up to an extra $145 a ton. But it starts at $45 a ton initially this October. So it's not only the tax, but for a US wheat shipper, it's also, well, it's the service fee that ship would have to pay if it were Chinese owned, if I needed access to that extra 25% of the fleet, or it is the market premium for trying to find a ship that is not Chinese owned, that is trading at a premium at this particular time in this market. And as you know, from any market situation in wheat or any grain commodity, harvest is going to be the highest demand. Wheat harvest time is going to create the largest demand for the cargo for non-Chinese owned ships. And that's the time that the freight's going to be, the premium for the non-Chinese freight is going to be the most expensive relative to 12 months out of the year. So again, I don't have a definitive number. I can't sit here today and say, gee, it's going to cost you $50 a ton extra. We have to see what the market dictates as far as that premium is concerned, but it could be at least 25, 35, $45 a ton extra freight under certain conditions. And you can imagine how devastating that would be to US exports.
Jay, do you see it realistic that the US could rebuild its capacity to build new ships? And if so, would you see that happening in the near future?
I think we need to do it. Again, the sad part of all this is the underlying need to increase US shipbuilding is real. It is needed, both militarily, merchant marine, and commercially. We need to have some commercial fleet. So if we could generate enough revenue from a different configured service fee, and I've got a proposal that I've been sent out on that. If we could just structure this a little differently so it doesn't hurt ag, and I think we can, and still bring by taxing commercial consumer imported goods on containers, I think we could generate billions of dollars per year towards a shipbuilding effort and we could then start and to improve our shipbuilding capacity. But keep in mind, and this is something I don't think USTR has thought down the road too much on. Even once you build these US ships, which are going to be terribly expensive, and you've now crewed them, which we don't have enough captains or crews. We're going to have to train those as well because they have to be US under these regulations. Even after you establish 5 or 10 or whatever more ships, those ships have to be competitive in the world market. They cannot be out there like the Jones Act ships of today. They can't be out there and saying, well, I'm a US built ship, but I still need 4 times the going rate in order to move from port to port. We're going to still have to subsidize those ships even after they're built. So there's a long-term cost and expense here that I think also has to be considered in this whole plan. But I'd like to see us put a service fee on inbound consumer goods that is not inflationary and does not hurt the American consumer. And there's a plan that we can do that will do that. And then leave ag alone, leave our exports alone and stop, because you're not going to collect money anyway. All you're going to do is harm the farmer and others in the United States.
Jay, we appreciate your support to the ag industry. I just want to read here. You were quoted in one of our regional publications about the bigger overriding concern is the impact to U.S. agriculture's reputation on the global marketplace. And you said we have sold ourselves for many years, and rightfully so, as a reliable and trustworthy supplier of corn, wheat, soybeans, and other agricultural products. Now that message is being tarnished. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Well, as you know, whether you're U.S. Wheat or U.S. Grains Council or Soybean Export Association, we've all, for the last 25 or 30 years at least, said to all of our customers, and every seminar we've ever done is, we in the United States are a reliable supplier of a quality product. And that's why you ought to come here and buy from us. And we have been. And we say, what happened under the Nixon administration, where we embargoed Japan on soybeans, we've told Japan and other countries, we'll never embargo you again. Come here, and we will not have the disruptions that they have in Argentina. We will not have the disruptions they have in Brazil or the Black Sea. We are your reliable, trustworthy supplier of a quality product. That's been our tagline and our message, and I believe it. I think it's all true and accurate up until today. And now that we're doing this, we're sending a different message, political message, economic message. And I think we're going to see it already. We're going to have foreign buyers say, United States, if you're going to act this way on the tariffs, on the USTR stuff, we darn well better go somewhere else and start investing in infrastructure in South America, in the Black Sea, possibly in Africa. But we better go somewhere else to diversify our supply chain, because the message that the U.S. is putting out right now is quite different. It's that we're not a reliable, trustworthy supplier. We're one that's starting to throw roadblocks up, and that is a terrible, damaging long-term message for our customers.
Thoughts on what the cost would be and how long it would take to build our own infrastructure?
Well, again, we're not going to build a new shipyard in a year. We're not going to build new ships in a year or two. It's going to be a multi-year process. But I do think we have to make improvements there. Again, I think the core need is valid. It is very real. It's just, how do we fund that without taxing the U.S. public, and B, damaging our export industries? And again, I think there's other alternatives that can be offered up, but the current one is going to do more harm than good, and certainly will not serve the intended purpose of helping build a U.S. maritime industry. We have to improve our shipbuilding. We have to find ship fitters and welders again. That's going to be a challenge too, because we lost that trade and people who know how to build ships. So we've got a lot of things to work on before we actually accomplish, let alone fund the need.
Yeah. We are just coming up on our 30-minute mark, Jay. Any final thoughts or advice you could throw out for our wheat farmers?
No, I honestly, I think in the short time we've had, we've really touched on the critical ones. One is the extra cost and the damage it will do, I think, to wheat farmers and corn farmers and soybean farmers. And then two, the damage it's going to do to our reputation, which is going to last a lot longer than the next couple of years. To me, those are the two big messages that we have to fight against and get somebody at USTR and in the administration to wake up and understand.
Should there be more direct input from the farm economy in these kind of discussions?
Well, the any administration, but certainly the current one has had knows that the farm sector has been a large supporter of the administration. They get a lot of votes and a lot of political support from the heartland of the United States. Um, so I think, yes, I think the farmers, fortunately, have as strong a voice with this administration that they have had or would have with most any other. So yeah, any voice they can raise against this and to ask for a little more, let a little more reasoning prevail would be helpful.
Understood. Jay O'Neill, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for your thoughts and expertise on this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good luck, good luck, and all the best to all of you.
And for those joining us today online, we will have this recording posted on our website as well as our YouTube channel and Spotify channel. So check back to those and share this with your friends and neighbors. And then be sure to join us back here in a couple weeks for our next From the Field Farm Chat with Idaho Wheat. Thanks again to everyone for joining us today.